He mocked her strength. The Earth girl lifted what his whole army couldn't move. The console said 31 species had tried. The container sat where it always sat, exactly where the last crew had given up. Senior Requisition Marshal Dovik Prusil did not look at the container. He looked at the clock. 3 hours and 41 minutes remained in the cargo window. 15 containers needed to move. His crew of 22 had spent the last 3 hours on the first one, and the first one had not moved. He was a Jackaran, barrel-chested even by his species standards, with cranial plates that flushed bronze under stress, a fact his subordinates had learned to read the way farmers read weather. Right now, his plates were the color of old copper, and Lieutenant Yoss was standing 2 meters further back than her post required. Prusil pulled up the manifest and read the line that had been mocking him since morning. Cargo window, Bay 14, closes 1800 hours. Garrison resupply contingent on full transfer. He had seen the garrison quartermaster's last message. He did not need to read it again. He crossed the bay floor, stepping around the magnetic anchor lines his crew had rigged and then abandoned, and stood in front of Container 1. It smelled of hydraulic fluid and old metal in here, the air thick with the particular staleness of a bay that ran its filtration at minimum to save on power costs. The loading ramp ahead of him angled upward at 12 degrees, a detail that had seemed irrelevant this morning and now felt like a personal insult. 44,000 kilograms total, 4 hours, 22 soldiers, 0 containers moved. He pulled up his console and opened the failure tally he had kept for 9 months. Species attempted, 31. Species cleared unassisted, 0. He found the number reassuring in the way that losing records are sometimes reassuring. At least the pattern was consistent. At least the doctrine held. At least the numbers still meant something. He filed a formal equipment requisition at 14:19 hours. Mechanical assist required. Load exceeds multi-crew unassisted capacity. Request emergency lifter redeployment from Dock 6. He already knew the answer. Dock 6's lifter was offline for maintenance. Dock 9's was rated for 8,000 kilograms, half what a single container weighed. The manifest had one other entry he hadn't looked at yet. He looked at it now. Supplemental contractor, Orin, S. Bay 14 attachment. Arrival window 1,400 and 21,430. He read it again. Supplemental contractor, single operator, no equipment listing. His plates stayed copper. She came in through the side entrance at 14:26, 6 minutes inside the window, which meant 6 minutes late by his count. She was in her mid-20s, compact in a way that suggested no particular species origin at a glance, wearing a cargo gray worksuit that had been washed enough times to forget what shade of gray it had started as. She was chewing something, a piece of dried root by the look of it, and she carried a worn tool bag over one shoulder as though it weighed approximately nothing. What stopped Prusil for a half-second was the sleeve. Left arm just below the shoulder, a small iron-on patch, faded to the point of near legibility, a simplified line drawing of a mountain range, lettering beneath it half gone, HAUGNSR, and then something, and then elevation CR, and then the rest swallowed by washing and time. He filed it the way he filed contractor branding, irrelevant. Some workers personalized their gear. It meant nothing about their capability. She looked at the containers. She looked at his soldiers. She looked at her wristcom. She put the tool bag down. "These the heavy ones," she said, "or the light ones?" He opened his mouth. He closed it. The question was self-evidently answered by the manifest display on the wall 3 meters to her left, which listed the container weight in large figures. He said, with the careful patience of a man who had explained regulations to contractors before, "Each container masses 4,000 kilograms. The total load is 44,000. You will find the relevant figures on the display." She nodded the way someone nods when they already know the answer and were asking something else entirely. He slid the safety waiver across his console tablet toward her. The waiver covers single-operator loads up to 600 kilograms. I will need you to review it before you attempt anything. Station regulation. She took the tablet. She signed it without reading it. She handed it back. He made a note to review it for liability purposes. Stay with this. He didn't know yet why he thought that. He filed it alongside the sleeve patch, alongside everything that had seemed marginally off in the last 4 minutes, and pulled up his pre-operation checklist instead. The alignment crew is stationed at the ramp, he said, walking her toward the loading setup. He explained the ramp grade, 12 degrees, a 3-variable spatial problem for the securing clamps, requiring the alignment rig to hold each container at the correct orientation while it was set down. He explained that the rig was laser-calibrated for exactly this bay's geometry. He explained that his crew would stand by to assist with bracing. She was looking at the ramp. Not at him, at the ramp. She had the look of someone sizing up a warped board, brief, clinical, mildly bored. He had seen that expression on equipment inspectors and structural engineers. He had never seen it on a contractor standing in front of 4,000 kilograms they were about to attempt alone. I can see where it goes, she said. I've got eyes. Senior loader Thaskell, his species' physically strongest handler, had needed 3 crewmates just to brace Container 1 when they'd attempted it earlier. The container was still in the same spot. Prussiel had logged that attempt under multi-crew bracing failure, insufficient load distribution, and had privately thought that the regulation weight handling codes had never looked more correct. He noted in his operational log, at 14:31 hours, contractor Orin confirmed on site, proceeding with single operator attempt per supplemental contract. Waiver signed, alignment crew standing by. He did not note what he thought about the attempt's likelihood of success, because his operational log was a formal document. He thought it anyway. This is the part where she injures herself and we activate emergency protocols. He did not say this. It would not be appropriate. What he did was position himself near the emergency comm panel, because that was where a reasonable station commander would position himself before a contractor attempted something inadvisable. She walked to Container 1. She did not ask for the alignment guides. She did not signal the bracing crew. She rolled her shoulders once, a small, routine movement, the kind a person makes before lifting something from a high shelf, and she picked it up. The cargo bay went quiet. Prussiel's cranial plates flushed from copper to deep bronze in approximately 1 second. She walked the 12-degree ramp without the laser guides, without the bracing crew, and set the container down at the correct securing angle by feel, the way someone sets a mug on a table they've used 1,000 times before. The transport's clamp engaged with a clean click. She came back down the ramp. She took a drink from a flask in her tool bag. She walked to Container 2. Prussiel's plates did not return to copper. He was already reaching for his console because there was a number he had not looked at yet, a field in the supplemental contractor record he had skimmed without reading, and his hands had decided to find it before his head had finished forming the instruction. He typed Orin S into the search field. He got distracted by Thaskell, who had said something in a low voice to the soldier next to him. Not words Prussiel caught, just a tone, the sound of someone recalibrating a belief they'd had very recently. He looked back at his console. The search result was open. He hadn't read it yet. Container 3 was already on the ramp. Stay close, because what she did next, and what it means about where she came from, is the part that changes the count. She did not slow down on Container 4. She paused between 5 and 6, not to rest, as far as Prussiel could determine, but to adjust the grip on her brace glove, which had shifted slightly. She took approximately 4 seconds to do it. Then she picked up Container 6. The alignment crew had not moved from their station. Their equipment was powered on. It had not been used. Prussiel looked at the laser calibration rig, its display still showing standby mode, its cost in his equipment, budget a number he chose not to think about right now, and typed something in his operational log that he immediately deleted, because it used the word redundant, and he wasn't ready to commit to that word yet. He pulled up the search result. Orin S. Origin, Horgens Rest Colony. He scrolled. Gravity index 2, 4 times standard galactic. He looked at the number. He looked at container 7, which was on the ramp. He looked at the number again. Cathedral station ran at 0, 91 times standard galactic. He knew this the way he knew the manifest figures and the failure tally automatically without having to calculate it. What he had to calculate was the differential. He did the arithmetic. He got an answer. He did it again because the first answer seemed like the kind of number that warranted checking. He got the same answer. His plates were a color he didn't have a precise name for. Somewhere between deep bronze and the shade his subordinates had learned to leave the room for. Container 8 was on the ramp. She was setting it at the correct angle without the guides, by feel. He had 38 seconds until the next container, and he did not know what to do with 38 seconds except stand very still and look at the number on his console, and then look at the loading ramp, and then look at the number again. The differential was 2, 7 times. He had done the math twice, and he was going to have to live with the answer. Cathedral at 0.91 standard. Horgens rest at 2.4. She was operating in gravity that was, by everything he understood about load-to-body mass ratios, approximately a vacation compared to the conditions her muscles had been built inside. Container 9 was on the ramp. He watched her set it at the correct securing angle. She did not check the clamp. She came back down the ramp, and he heard the clamp engage behind her, clean and immediate, the same sound as the previous 8. Lieutenant Yoss had moved from her post again, not far, 2 meters, 3, but enough that Prussiel noticed. She was not watching the ramp. She was watching Sable Orin in the way you watch a thing you have decided to reassess from a safer distance. Prussiel did not say anything to her. He looked back at his console instead. The failure tally was still open. Species attempted, 31. Species cleared unassisted, 0. He had found this number reassuring for 9 months. He looked at it now, and it felt like a document that had been translated incorrectly, the same words in the same order, meaning something different because the context had quietly shifted underneath them. He did not close it yet. He was not ready to close it yet. Container 10 was on the ramp. "Your gravity here," she said, on the way back from Container 11, without looking at him, in the tone of someone making a mild observation about weather, "is pretty nice, actually." She reached into her tool bag and took a drink from her flask. "Feels like I'm working in a pool." He had been about to say something. He could not remember now what it had been. The sentence had been fully formed 4 seconds ago and was now completely gone. His species' military record for an unassisted lift was 780 kilograms. This was the number the doctrine's outer reference used, the strongest registered handler in their military's history, tested under controlled conditions, formally logged. He knew this the way he knew his failure tally. He had always found it useful context. She had, by his count, just moved 44,000 kilograms in. He checked the chronometer, 23 minutes. She was on Container 12. He opened the failure tally. He looked at it for approximately 4 seconds. He closed it. He did not delete it. He was not ready to delete it. He needed a moment. The alignment crew had been standing at their station for 23 minutes. The laser calibration rig was still on standby. One of the operators, a young Velhari, 6 months out of certification, had sat down on a cargo crate and was watching the ramp with his hands resting on his knees, the way people sit when they have run out of useful things to do with their bodies. Prussiel looked at the remarks column in his operational log, where he had been trying to describe the alignment crew's status. He had typed and deleted the word redundant twice. He typed it a 3rd time. He looked at it. He deleted it again, because writing it felt like making a judgment he had not been authorized to make, and also because it did not seem like an adequate word for what he was watching. He left the field blank. She set Container 13 down, and he noticed, for the first time, that she had a tell. It was not a sign of effort, or if it was not the sign he would have looked for. She did not slow down, did not shift her grip, did not let her breathing change in any way he could detect from 15 meters. What she did barely, between 12 and 13, was size up the next container the way a carpenter eyes a warped board. Brief, clinical, slightly bored. He had been a station logistics commander for 11 years. He had watched every species that came through this bay attempt loads above their range, and they all had tells. The Vorath went still before they gave out. The Kethpalarans started compensating with their secondary joints. His own species flushed and went quiet. Everybody had a ceiling, and everybody advertised that ceiling if you knew what to watch for. Hers did not. He typed into his console, contractor performing within projected parameters. He stared at it. He deleted the whole sentence. He typed, contractor performing. He filed that. It was the most accurate thing he could commit to. Container 14 was on the ramp. She set it at the correct angle. The clamp engaged. She came back down. She rolled her left shoulder once, the same small, routine movement as before, the mountain patch catching the bay light for a second, and she picked up container 15. 27 minutes after she had picked up the first one, she set the last one down. The cargo window showed 3 hours and 13 minutes remaining. She came down the ramp and took another drink from her flask. She looked at the transport's hold, 15 containers, secured, clamps engaged, and then she looked at the manifest display on the wall, and then she looked at Prusil with the expression of someone who has completed a checklist and is checking whether there is a second page. Anything else in the window, she said. He looked at the hold, he looked at the chronometer, he looked at her. He said no. She nodded, she picked up her tool bag. She paused at the side entrance and turned back. You've got a nice operation here, clean bay. She said it the way people say something is fine, not enthusiastic, not dismissive, just the honest assessment of someone who has worked in enough places to have a baseline. Then she left. He stood in the cargo bay for a moment that lasted longer than it should have. The filtration hum was the only sound. 22 soldiers and 1 alignment crew stood in a space that smelled of hydraulic fluid and had the specific quality of silence that a room acquires when something has happened in it that the room was not designed for. He opened the failure tally. He sat with it for 11 seconds. He deleted it. He did not start a new one. 3 weeks later. The narration does not ease into it. Emergencies don't ease into anything. He was in the middle of a procurement review when the distress call came through, and within 4 seconds of hearing it he had already pulled up the subdock schematics and already known, from the schematic alone, what the equipment situation was going to be. Subdock 7, the oldest section of the station, low ceiling clearance, Durasteel composite infrastructure laid down 30 years ago when the station's original designers had been working from a different load spec. A beam, one of the primary load-bearing members in the corridor, had failed. Not collapsed fully, but dropped and wedged. Chief Engineer Rolvik's initial assessment came through in 6 minutes. Rolvik was thorough. It was his best quality and occasionally an inconvenient one. Beam mass, 12,000 kilograms, ceiling clearance in the corridor, insufficient for mobile lift deployment. Personnel trapped, 40. Air supply at current consumption rate, 90 minutes. Prusil read the last line of the assessment 3 times. 90 minutes. 40 people. He pulled up the equipment options. He went through them the way you go through a list when you already suspect you know what the list says. The mobile lifter in Dock 6, back online, rated for 8,000 kilograms, could not fit in the corridor. The corridor clearance was the hard fact that ended every option he considered. 8,000 kilograms in a space that could reach the beam was better than 12,000 kilograms with room to maneuver, and neither of those numbers was useful right now. He read Rolvik's full analysis when it arrived, 14 pages. He did not read every word. He read the last sentence of each page instead. Insufficient, page 3. Insufficient, page 7. Insufficient, page 11. Insufficient, page 14. He put the report down and picked up his comm. She arrived in 12 minutes. She had a different work suit on, same gray, cleaner, and the same tool bag, and the mountain patch on her left sleeve was exactly as illegible as it had been 3 weeks ago. She walked down the subdock corridor without being asked to and stopped in front of the beam, and she looked at it the way she had looked at the containers. Brief, clinical, slightly bored. She prodded it once with her boot, near where it had wedged against the composite wall. She looked up at the ceiling clearance. She looked at the corridor width. Prusiel was standing with Rolvik, whose 14 pages were on a tablet under his arm. Rolvik's species showed distress through their secondary skin, a slight translucency along the neck and jaw that meant the capillaries were dilating under pressure. Rolvik was very translucent right now. She turned from the beam to Prusiel. "So the hard part," she said, "is the ceiling clearance or the weight?" He said, "Both. The lifter can't fit in the corridor." She looked at the ceiling. She looked at the beam. "Because if it's just the weight that's the problem," she said, "I can do that part." Rolvik made a sound. It was not a word. Prusiel looked at his own hands, which had, without his deciding to, pulled up her contractor file on his console again. Horgen's rest. 4 times, 40 workers, 90 minutes. The mobile lifter rated for 8,000 kilograms, sitting outside a corridor it could not enter, useful as a painting on a wall. He said, "How long do you need to prepare?" She was already opening her tool bag. She put on the brace first. It was not dramatic equipment. A wide neoprene wrap for each wrist, reinforced at the palm, the kind of thing sold in colony supply catalogs under general labor accessories. She pulled the left one tight with her teeth. She pulled the right one tight with her left hand. She took the work gloves from the bottom of the tool bag and put them on. She looked at the people in the corridor. "Back up 10 meters, she said, not loud. "The way you say watch your step on a ramp you use every day. All of you past the junction." Rolvik looked at Prusiel. Prusiel had already taken a step back. He did not know precisely when he had decided to do that. They moved. The workers' rescue team moved with them, 6 people who had arrived with equipment that was now stacked against the corridor wall, rated and useless. Prusiel counted heads as they cleared the junction. He was doing it automatically, the way he logged manifests, because counting was something his hands knew how to do when the rest of him was not certain what to do. 22 people behind the junction line. She did not count down. She positioned herself at the beam's midpoint. Prusiel noticed this without deciding to, without a calculator, without the structural schematic he had open on his console, and she bent her knees, and she got her hands under it. The beam did not move immediately. This was the part he would remember most clearly later. Not the lift itself, the moment before it when nothing happened. Her face went tight in a way her face had not gone during the cargo run, a visible effort that the containers had not required, and the beam stayed where it was. And Prusiel was aware of the air supply counter running on his wristcom and the 40 people on the other side of the wedge and the 14 pages that had each ended the same way. Then the beam moved. A centimeter, then 2, then it was rising. He started counting aloud without deciding to. He was not counting the centimeters. He was counting the people coming through. 10, 12. The corridor was narrow enough that they had to move in a line. 15. Someone was helping someone else. He couldn't see who, just the motion of support, one body steadying another. 20. Her voice reached him from down the corridor, strained past the point where he would have called it her normal voice. 10 more seconds. 26, 28, 29. He was gripping his console so hard the casing was registering the pressure on the haptic sensor. 33, 35, 38. Last one clear. 39, 40. The beam came down. The sound it made when it hit the composite floor echoed through 3 sections of subdock, and dust came off the ceiling in a thin fall, and then the corridor was very quiet. She sat down on a cargo crate near the wall. She pulled the right work glove off and looked at her palm. She put it back on. "Going to need some ice," she said, to no one in particular. She looked up at Prusiel, and a boring week. She looked at the beam where it lay. "You got anything that needs lifting next month? I'll sort out the rate." Rolvik's 14-page report was on his tablet under his arm. He had been holding it the entire time. He did not know what to do with it now. He held it like a man holds something he has forgotten he is carrying. Prusiel filed the incident report at 16:41 hours. He put Rolvik's analysis in the attached documentation and marked the resolution field. Resolved, supplemental contractor assist, Orin S. He did not know what to put in the method field. He typed manual lift and looked at it for a long moment and typed nothing else. 40 workers, 0 casualties. He went back to his office and sat at his desk and did not open anything on his console for 6 minutes. This was unusual for him. He was aware of it being unusual. He sat with it anyway. The mountain patch came to him without warning, not the physical object, which was on a worksuit somewhere on the station, but the image of it. The cartoon range, the half-legible text, HAUGNSR and then something, elevation CR and then nothing. He had filed it twice as contractor branding. He had looked at it on her sleeve when she was on container 1 and again when she was pulling on the work gloves in the subdock corridor, and both times he had filed it as irrelevant and moved on because there had been something more immediately demanding to process. He opened the station database. He typed Horgen's Rest, and this time he did not get distracted. He typed elevation crew. The search came back immediately. He read the first 3 lines and stopped. He read them again. He looked at his console for a moment, and then he went back to work, because there was a garrison resupply to finalize and a Dock 6 maintenance window to reschedule and a post-incident debrief with Rolvik that was already 12 minutes overdue. The station did not pause because a logistics commander had read 3 lines of a database entry and needed a moment. But the lines stayed with him, not as words exactly, but as the shape of a thing that had been sitting in plain sight and that he had not seen correctly. 3 days later, Administrator Quellen Vross requested a briefing. Not suggested, requested. Quellen Vross ran the briefing room on the upper level, the climate-controlled one, with the full data wall, and when he requested rather than suggested, it meant the station's institutional memory had noticed something and was preparing to recalibrate. Prusiel arrived with his incident report, his operational log from the cargo run, and Rolvik's 14 pages, which he had not stopped carrying. Quellen Vross was already at the data wall. He was a Theresi, a species that moved through administrative systems the way some species moved through water, with the particular comfort of a creature in its native medium. He did not greet Prusiel the way he usually did. He pulled up a display and let it speak first. The display showed a map. Not a station map, a galactic survey map, colony worlds, settlement clusters, the long arcs of habitation that species had drawn across the reachable volume over 3 centuries. Prusiel was familiar with it in the abstract. He had never had occasion to look at it closely because it was the kind of large-scale information that a mid-tier station logistics commander did not generally need for his work. Quellen Vross said, "How many colony worlds do you think humanity has?" Prusiel looked at the map. He said the number that came to mind. Quellen Vross touched the display. A subset of worlds lit up, not all of them, a specific selection filtered by some criterion he hadn't named yet. 147 of those, he said, are classified more hostile than Earth itself. Prusiel looked at the number on the display. He looked at the worlds. They were spread across the map in a pattern that did not look like accident, but he could not yet see what pattern it was. Earth, Quellen Vross said, is classified a Class 7 death world by the Galactic Council's Environmental Assessment Standard. Every other Class 7 or higher species in the Council's member registry has spread into easier environments when given the option. He paused. Humans have not done that. Prusiel looked at the map. They have done the opposite, Quellen Vross said. This was the moment, though Prusiel would not have been able to name it as such until later, when the shape of the thing that had been sitting in plain sight began to declare itself. Not the lift, not the cargo run. Those had been extraordinary. What was becoming clear, as Quellen Vross walked through the survey data with the unhurried pace of a man who had had a day longer to absorb it, was that extraordinary was the wrong frame entirely. He had been applying the wrong frame. He had been treating what she had done as an outlier, a single data point from an unusual colony, something that fell outside the distribution but did not change the shape of the distribution. The map said otherwise. 147 worlds, harder than the planet that had already produced her. Chosen, not stumbled into, settled deliberately by people who had looked at the options and picked the ones that would cost them something. The contractor who cleared your cargo window, Quellenvros said, pulling up a second display, smaller, a colony profile, Horgen's Rest, comes from a gravity index of 2.4 standard. Her family has been on that colony for 4 generations. 4. He let that sit for a moment. You watched her move 44,000 kilograms in 27 minutes, he said, and she called your station's gravity nice. The word landed differently the second time. In the cargo bay, it had been funny, a charming understatement, the kind of line that made his subordinates exchange glances. Here, against the map with 147 lit worlds behind it, it was something else. He had not changed the word she used. She had not been performing understatement. She had been making a straightforward, accurate assessment of her working conditions, and the assessment had been nice. His plates were bronze. They had been bronze for most of the past 3 weeks, and he had stopped noticing. She was not, Quellenvros said carefully, operating at her actual capability. Prasil looked at the wall. The cargo run, the containers, the pool line, the 27 minutes, the beam in subdock 7, 12,000 kilograms, ceiling clearance insufficient for anything rated to lift it, 40 people on the wrong side of it, and she had asked which part was the hard part in the tone of someone asking which end of a corridor the supply room was at. Not performing, not even trying, below her actual capability the entire time. We will need to revise the contractor assessment protocols, Quellenvros said. I will need your input on what the revised limits should look like. Prasil nodded. He was still looking at the wall. 147 worlds. He was going to need a new failure tally. Not to replace the old one, he was not going to do that. But because the old one had been measuring the wrong thing, with the wrong instrument, calibrated for a different world entirely, and at some point, a man who runs an operation correctly has to acknowledge when his instruments have been reading wrong and understand what that means for every number they ever produced. He picked up his console. He started drafting the new protocol. The data wall stayed lit behind him, the survey map, the 147 worlds, the Horgen's Rest colony profile with the gravity index in clean figures at the top of the page. He did not turn it off. He was not ready to turn it off yet. Quellenvros had not finished. He pulled up a third display, smaller than the map, a single colony profile, the kind of dense administrative record that station systems generated automatically and that almost no one read. It had a photograph at the top, a landscape, reddish rock face, atmospheric filters visible at the horizon line. The gravity index was in the header. Prasil had already memorized it. The term the Horgens Rest settlers use for families of 4 or more consecutive generations at high gravity index, Quellenvros said, is elevation crew. Prasil looked at the screen. It is not a nickname. It is not branding. It is a formal biological classification used in the colony's own medical and census records. These families have undergone measurable skeletal restructuring, myofibril density increases outside the standard range for the species, and cardiovascular output that the colony's own physicians assess separately from baseline human norms. He touched the display and the medical data came up. The colony does not advertise this. It is simply how they keep records of what they have become. Prasil thought about a worn worksuit, a cartoon mountain range, letters half-washed into illegibility. He thought about the word irrelevant and what he had done with it. She has been carrying that classification on her sleeve, Quellenvros said, since the first day she came through our dock. There it was. Not the cargo run, not the beam. Those had been the data, extraordinary, irrefutable, each one a number he would spend the rest of his career citing in revised protocol documents. What had just inverted was the frame. He had watched her do things his instruments said were impossible, and he had updated the data without updating the instrument. He had thought, she is an outlier. He had thought, one unusual contractor from one unusual colony. He had written manual lift in a method field and stared at it and not known what else to say. And the reason he hadn't known was that the word he needed did not exist in any category the doctrine had given him. The instrument had been calibrated for a different world. Every number the failure tally had ever produced, every weight limit in every single operator waiver he had ever handed across a console tablet, the 600-kilogram ceiling, the species comparison tables, the 31 species record that he had kept for 9 months because it told him the doctrine was correct, all of it measured in a unit that did not convert to her. She had signed the waiver without reading it. He had made a note to review it for liability purposes. She had found it funny, not unkindly, just accurate. The document had not applied to her. She had known that. She had signed it the way you sign something when you understand that the form exists for reasons that have nothing to do with you personally, and you are not going to make the clerk's day harder by explaining that. His plates had not gone back to neutral since the cargo bay. He noticed now that he had stopped waiting for them to. Quellenvros gave him the week he needed. The new protocol draft took 4 days, not because the writing was hard. Prussiel knew exactly what the document needed to say, but because every time he wrote a line, he had to go back and check what assumption it was replacing and make sure he understood the assumption clearly enough to name it. You could not write a better instrument without understanding exactly how the old one had been wrong. Human contractors from high-gravity colony classifications, Gravity Index 2, 0 times standard or above, to be assessed under separate operational protocols. Standard single-operator load ceilings do not apply. Maximum load assessment to be conducted by physical evaluation, not weight table. He read it back, he filed it. He looked at the failure tally field on his console, the space where species attempted, 31. Species cleared unassisted, 0 had lived for 9 months. He had deleted the tally 3 weeks ago. He had not started a new one. He left the field empty. Some instruments should be retired when they stop measuring correctly, and the correct response to retiring them is not to build an identical replacement and start counting again. That night, sitting at his desk with the station on night cycle and the corridor lights outside his office at 30%, he pulled up the elevation crew database entry, not the 3 lines he had read the first time, the full entry. Elevation crew, Horgens Rest Colony Internal Classification. Criteria, 4 or more consecutive generations of continuous residence at Gravity Index 2, 0 times standard galactic or above. Medical assessment, formal reclassification of bone density, myofibril composition, and cardiovascular output under non-standard biological assessment protocols. Colony usage, informal term adopted in medical records, census documents, and occupational registries. Etymology, original usage unknown. Current application, identifies individuals whose physiological baseline cannot be accurately measured against standard galactic norms. He read the last line again. Cannot be accurately measured against standard galactic norms. He sat with that for a while. The station hummed. The corridor lights held at 30%. He thought about a cartoon mountain range on a left sleeve, half-washed, barely legible, worn not as a statement, but as a record. A classification she carried around on her arm in a font too small for most species to read without looking closely. He had looked at it 3 times. He had filed it 3 times as irrelevant. He had never seen it correctly. The message from Sable came 2 weeks later, mid-morning, between a maintenance roster review and a procurement meeting he was already late for. It was short, the way all her communications were short, he had learned, because she moved on the moment a thing was done and did not revisit. Marshall, thanks for the hazard pay, came through fast, back on contracts, wanted to say your station is a nice place to work. Clean operation, good sightlines, no drama, the gravity's easy on the joints. He read it to the end. Nice safe station, basically a vacation. He read it twice more. Not irony, he understood that now with a certainty he had not had the framework for 3 weeks ago. She had meant it. Cathedral Station, with its 0.91 standard gravity and its recycled air cargo bays and its loading ramps angled at 12 degrees, was, by the genuine assessment of a woman who had grown up in conditions that would hospitalize the equipment sent to help them, a vacation. A nice place. Easy on the joints. He thought about the 44,000 kilograms, the 27 minutes, the pool. He thought about 12,000 kilograms and 40 people and 90 minutes of air, and the way she had asked which part was the hard part in the tone of someone asking for directions. She had been on a vacation the entire time. She had been doing her easiest work. She had called it nice, and she had meant it, and the distinction between what she found nice and what the doctrine had found impossible was a gap his instruments had no unit for. He filed the personal log entry at 18:03 hours before he left for the evening. Before he wrote it, he poured himself a half cup of water from the carafe on his desk, the one that had been there all day, gone lukewarm, and he didn't drink it. He set it down and looked at his console and thought about what was actually true, stripped of the doctrine and the failure tally and the 600-kilogram ceiling, in the plainest words he could find for it. Then he typed, "She called our station safe. She meant it. That distinction should concern us all." He read it back, he filed it, he picked up the water and drank it. He turned off the console. The screen went dark. The elevation crew database entry, the survey map with its 147 lit worlds, the colony profile with its medical reclassification criteria, all of it folded into the standby state, replaced by his own reflection in the dark screen for a moment before that too faded. The station's ordinary hum continued around him. He put on his jacket. He turned off the desk light. He walked out into the corridor, and the night cycle lights were at 30%, and the station was the same as it had always been, running quietly at the edge of a supply corridor that was not particularly important in the larger scale of things, carrying its ordinary work forward the way stations do. He had sent her the hazard pay before she asked. He had revised the protocol before Quellenvros requested a second briefing. He had deleted the failure tally and left the field empty and written a document that named the assumption it was replacing. He did not know if any of that was enough. He suspected it was not the right question. The right question was the one that had been sitting in the database entry all along, in the line that said, "cannot be accurately measured against standard galactic norms." Not what she had done, but what it meant that there were 147 worlds producing people like her, and that she had found Cathedral Station a nice place to work, and that she had signed the waiver without reading it, and that she had been right not to. The corridor was empty. His footsteps were the only sound. He walked toward the lift.